function, for me, function of the room is the most important thing. A lot of people think that by making a room good looking and nice fabrics and things, that's it. For me, it isn't. The moment you actually use a beautiful room, or you think it's beautiful, the moment you go in and you cannot use it, you sit down and you don't know where to put your cup of tea, or you sit and it's too far away from the next person, or you sit down and it's uncomfortable, that's the end of that room. So for me, what goes on behind the scenes, which is what I call the unseen, things that the clients don't even know, the public do not know, what has gone into the room before the room actually happens, much more important than the final look of the room.
So what about this?
Again, it's just, one of those things that, people think I only do very dark, very complicated, very whatever rooms. No, I do whatever the clients want. And this is a prime example of a very light room, a cottage-like room in the countries in Cornwall, very off-white fabrics, like what most people do. But I think, again, the difference might be from some of those other rooms is that even in a room like this, the amount of detail or the amount of thought that has gone into it before just ordinary sofas and a couple of chairs are brought in is enormous, because you can't, every possibility has been thought about as to how people are going to sit, how they're going to use it, how they're going to live in it. So it's another prime example of it doesn't have to be cluttered, it doesn't have to be crowded, it doesn't have to be dark, it's the same sort of thing that applies to anyone.
This is kind of a spectrum, because somebody actually kind of defined your style as country house meets Hamptons.
Yeah, well, I quite like that. I like the idea of country house meets Hamptons. I like the idea of lots of things meeting. Country house meets Hamptons, country house meets Middle East, country house meets China, China meets somewhere else. I like that. I like the sort of melange of different periods and different things, because the whole point is we're trying to create a timeless look. We're trying to create something that has been there forever, and different people have just, done a bit of tweaking to it. So it could have been a 17th century flat or house in Paris, but then in the 17th, 18th century there was a huge, interest in chinoiserie, so there would have been Chinese things in there. So it's like a journey that I take through the centuries and through the decades with my clients, something that suits them, to bring that into the rooms.
And in your book also you mentioned that the comfort you learn actually in this country.
Well, for me, comfort is something that is one of the most important things, and it's really in this country that comfort, the way it is, makes sense. It doesn't quite exist anywhere else. I mean, you could be on the continent and there are lovely rooms and they function well and nice to sit in, but that sort of ultimate comfort of letting go on a deep sofa and very comfortable, it really is very particularly here, and that's where I really learned it, and this really gets applied to wherever I can. Again, another room that is like again, Hamptons meet country house. I love these TNG boards because you can do endless things with them. You can paint them any color you want. It gives you a sort of texture, and then you can bring the texture over it. One of the things I love are these high headboards, because A, they always look good. They don't look like, they make the place unusual by having it higher than what everybody has, which is a sort of standard height. And it gives you an added sort of, you feel comfortable sort of sitting against it, which is very important again, another aspect of feeling comfortable.
And obviously that's perfect Feng Shui. We talked about headboards earlier. And your designs, your bedrooms are actually very famous.
I automatically do this with wherever. I mean, sometimes clients aren't so worried about it at the beginning, but it always, when they see it finished, somehow it works.
Design for senses. So talk about your dining rooms.
Well, dining rooms are one of those things I always tell clients, you can let go. If you're lucky enough to have a dining room, most people don't have it, I accept it. But if you're lucky enough to have a dining room, why not let go slightly there? You can make it dark, you can make it sensuous, you can make it all sorts of things. So this is a sort of, probably, I don't know how many dining rooms we've got coming up, but I mean, that's the sort of thing that I would do. This is covered, the walls are covered in hand-painted stamped leather, which is what you would have had in a lot of country houses around Europe in the 17th and 18th century. And I love it. Gives a texture which is different to anything else. And the good thing, the marvelous thing about leather of this time is that you can age it to, as far back as you want to, depending on the client's needs. Some people want it to be newer looking, some people want it to look as if it's been there, it's been restored. My preference is for anything that I do to look as if it was there. I just came in and I just restored a bit. And we didn't really do too much to things. And that's the sort of thing I had in my, the sort of brief I give to myself is that I'm dealing with different generations of the same family with different things in this room. And it's just me coming in as the last thing to just clean it up.
I love this picture because I don't know if you can see it, but the ceiling is beautiful.
Yes, again, it's playing with mirrors. Mirrors, I love mirrors. I mean, wherever I can put mirrors, I do. And I think in Feng Shui it works quite well too, depending obviously where you put it. But it gives an added dimension to any room that you do. Most people react well to it, especially in dining rooms, because candles and glass and mirrors, they just love each other. It's just a sort of eternal love. And this is what I always play on. And I mean, this particular dining room is interesting because the modern eye is not used to a completely candlelit room because it's too dark for us. So the idea was that it is actually lit invisibly, the room. Very thin washes of light come on the walls. But the clients, I said that as the sort of night gets further and further and people get slightly more tipsy and all that, the lights can dim down to nothing. And it's only candles and glass, and it's absolutely magical. So it worked very well, one of those rooms. Right, another completely opposite room. The whole point of these rooms, is that, they do look different. I mean, we've looked at different styles. Is that, again, what I always go on is that sort of timeless look of them, that wherever they are, this happens to be in Lebanon, that they've been there for a long time, since the house began. In fact, this is an interesting room because this was a veranda, a balcony really, which was not a room, and we turned it into a room. So this is absolutely brand new. But by using the elements that we have, we brought it back to sort of the eye thinks is from another century. So for example, that cypress tree is a motif that happens, it's very popular in the Middle East. You get it in Iran, you get it in Turkey. I had these tiles made with that cypress tree, but it's got old colors in it, vegetable colors. These cushions that you see, they're all based on old Syrian patterns and needlework, the way they did it, so we copied those. The table is old, the chair is old. You always have to have some genuinely old things as well. You can't just fake everything. You can put things together, which is what I like doing. I like putting a fantastic piece and then on top of it something which is rubbish, but it actually is decorative. Because I'm not creating museums, I'm creating homes. And I always think of people as travelers. People who've lived in these houses as travelers, and they've brought things with them. And it's nice to have all these things that belong to different generations of your family to be there. This, I suppose you put in because of the jib door. I love what I call these jib doors because I love the idea of surprise. I love the idea of going into a room, perhaps hopefully thinking, oh, wow, this is a fantastic room. And there are things still beyond that you do not know they exist. And this is a typical room. It's a very grand, posh dining room, absolutely vast. And there's a jib door with paintings on it, so it looks like a wall. But in fact, when you open it, there is another sort of over-the-top, mad cloakroom beyond it. So the positioning of it is, again, very important. The way I always do my houses, the way the traffic works, and the way different places are placed. When you have a dining room, it's got to have very good access to a kitchen, it's got to have very good access to a cloakroom. All these things have to actually happen. And at the same time, you've got to make sure that the house, you're not going against the house. When you're actually dealing with a 19th century or 18th century house in London, most of them have been wrecked by developers. Most of them, all the old features have been taken away, like the cornices, skirtings, architraves, all the openings are the wrong size. What I try and do is bring that sort of balance and harmony back into these rooms, put the original cornice back. Wherever I can, keep the room the way it was. Obviously, in the 18th century or 19th century, they didn't have bedroom suites, bathroom en suite, it just didn't exist. So you've got to do it with, with awareness of the original plans and see how close you can get to that, to bring that harmony back. Because no matter how much you know about architecture or how much you know about interior design, the mind, when you go into these rooms, knows that there is something right in this house, or there is something completely wrong in it. And that is, all that work behind the scenes pays off, because hopefully when somebody comes into one of these houses and it does have that right feeling, is because of all those things that you're not conscious of.
So that kind of sense of mystery and expectation is very important. So if you have a chance to design a hallway, you wouldn't put a staircase straight in front of the door.
No, I wouldn't do that. And I would respect the fact that it's an entrance hall, and it's got to look like an entrance hall. It's got to be welcoming. It's got to bring all your, it's got to welcome you with a nice sort of energy. You have to feel good. But there's got to be surprises beyond that you do not know what's going to be there.
So obviously, balance and harmony is key in Feng Shui. How do you do that in your designs?
Balance and harmony. But really, balance and harmony, I think, is to do with what I was saying earlier about looking at a house, whether it's a flat, whether it's a room, whether it's a huge house, whether it's a palace, whatever, it's the same thing. It's really having respect for the house, for the story of the house. Every house has got a story. And I know it sounds peculiar when I say these things, that every house has got a story, but I think I'm crazy. But it's not crazy, because every house tells you things. When you go around a house for the first time, it tells me things. On a very mundane level, and I use this because people then react to it and understand it, is that when you go to a house, again, no matter what size, if the room, the main room, is north-facing, and your client is saying, oh, I want this to be a sunny room, I want it to be really light, I want it to be fantastic. If I said yes, it would be a huge disaster, wouldn't it? I mean, it's never going to be sunny, never going to be nice the way they want it, never going to be. So you've got to have respect for the house. You've got to have respect for the way it was, the way it was built. So the balance and harmony is part of that, of bringing the original balance and harmony back as much as you can. And at the same time, really for me, that balance and harmony is in the way the traffic works in the house. Somebody's thought about it within the room, how it works, where you're going to sit, and whether you're going to hit the ottoman, or the coffee table is too big, and the other chair is too far. And then what happens vis-a-vis this, and the next door room, whether they relate to each other from a functional point of view, and then where the staircase is, and how you go up, and how you get into the bedroom. It's all that, when all that has been thought about, and is there, balance and harmony just comes.
So in this room, you've got obviously nice balance and kind of symmetrical elements.
For me, I don't like obvious symmetry. I'm obsessed by obvious symmetry, and not obvious, but by symmetry, architecturally. Because architecturally, I want to have my rooms perfect, if possible. Put all the cornices back, the openings are exactly the right proportion, the way they were, all that. But then with my interior design, I give it a surface chaos in a way, because I want it to look as if people have lived there for generations. These very new-looking hotel-like rooms, which are fine for a hotel room, but not. If you want to have that essence of rooms which have been there, of your family, you cannot have that. So I'm endlessly sort of balancing things. So I don't like two chairs exactly the same, but the amount of effort that goes into making sure that the two chairs have got the same sort of, they occupy the same space. So the eye sees the balance. But it's more interesting because they're not the same. But the background is the same, and the eye sees it no matter what anybody thinks. You see it. But the decoration is slight chaos, even though everything's been thought about very carefully. This is jumble. Certainly, I mean, this is a newly created home as well. It's brand new. We do interior architecture as well as interior design. So when we are lucky, we get, if it's a newly built, not in London, but in the, say, in the Middle East or in Europe, we get these houses that are being built. If I'm very lucky, I get it when they've just finished, you know, the concrete. It's a concrete block. And then we come in. And we do literally everything. We put all the divisions in. All the bathrooms are done. Everything is specified by us. So it's like one vision. So it's not a vision of an architect and a vision of somebody else who's actually come and said, I hate everything you've done. So how can I get rid of all that and start from scratch? It's like one vision. And this is one of those houses that, you know, it was a concrete block. We inherited it and we took over the whole thing. And the whole point of this, again, was how do I bring an old tradition into a brand new room? And this is an inspiration from these houses on the Bosphorus, which they call Yale, the wooden houses on the Bosphorus. And they always have these ante-rooms that look at the Bosphorus. And this, actually, inspiration came from there, but obviously with the twist of 20th, 21st century and me and the client and all sorts of things. But the shutters are always closed because the Bosphorus is beyond, but we don't see it. So it's like, literally like that. Right, another entrance hall. This is in Beirut. This is a house that I was very lucky when I got it. It was a concrete house built in the 40s, bombed. There was absolutely nothing in it. Nothing. There was not one cornice. There was not one skirting. There was not one anything. We actually completely redivisioned the floors. We were very lucky. The load-bearing walls happened to be in the right places, so we could do lots of things with it. And you know, the staircase is completely new. But it's just that idea of, again, the brief was, when I was with the client, the brief was East meets West, circa 1900 and beyond. And how do you do that? So the staircase was done based on things that I'd seen in the streets of Beirut. Sound of water, again, we had this fountain carved especially, but it, again, when you really see it, looks old. The idea of sound of water, which I love, wherever I can put sound of water, it's really the five senses that I'm always thinking about at the back of my mind, no matter what happens, in every room, even at home. And then the idea of this Roman mosaic came in, and I was lucky because there are still people in Beirut who can make a Roman mosaic. And then I chose every single color of it. It doesn't look great here. It's very soft and gentle, the coloring. So it's just with these elements, suddenly we took it back to that circa 1900, because they would have probably had all these different things, and they would have been influenced by Europe. They would have been still in the Middle East. So let's have a bit of this and a bit of that and see what happens.
Let's talk about this room.
This is another room in that house, which is off that board that we just looked at. Again, same idea of how do I bring Europe into the Middle East and make it work. So all the things of the function and the traffic and the whatever has gone into this, as to how people are going to use it, automatically it's gone into it. But the elements which are interesting is that the towers, I had those made in Portugal because they're still making old-fashioned towers with very nice old colors. So that is like already is taking me back a few decades into something else. And then by having suddenly a 1940s chandelier that, you know, suddenly one of the members of the family had gone to Europe and bought it from Venice or something, brought it there and hung it. The idea of an Indian durry, another ancestor going to India and then buying that. And then suddenly two actually proper 18th century French chairs covered in the Fortuny fabric, which they would have probably had in the family. The two tables on either side of the sofa is something that I make as part of my own furniture, but it's sort of fitted within this sort of look. And then suddenly we had a room. And that was it. Again, I need to, especially with new houses, I need to give them that layer of history. You know, how do I make a concrete block into something nice that looks as if the eye comes in and feels comfortable and feels as if, oh, there is, you know, this has been through a lot, this house, and it's been just cleaned up. And again here, when I got this house, there was one window, square in the center, nothing else. No fireplace, no openings, nothing. So by actually bringing in this triple window, which is a very traditional feature in houses in Lebanon, you immediately gave it an element of history. A past came in, but a past that is lovely. You feel comfortable with it. It functions well because these doors open and you can go out and come in and brings the air in. All sorts of things that would have been important for these houses. And then by putting that conical, again, Ottoman-shaped fireplace, which is completely brand new, again, you brought that element of history and past, but clean, nice, something that is still functional. People, it takes them back, and yet they think, well, it's nice looking, it's clean looking, it's fine for this house. So, again, this is a 17th century flat in Paris, and the idea was what to do with it, because it had nothing, no features left. And how does one bring in that element of the past and make it functional? Well, the element of the past came in with this chinoiserie decoration, which is, I mean, this was really a corridor, if you like, a wide corridor. So by giving a room, first of all, function, then it becomes a room. So the function of this room became like a boudoir come spare bedroom come this sort of thing, that you can actually sit there, even though you walk through it. So it sort of became a room already, but by making it a room, then you actually have to design according to that function you've given the space. But we were lucky enough, do you see these knobs? These are actually all cupboards. And one of them on the other side goes into a shower room. So everything's hidden, everything's panelled, everything looks as if it was there, you just restored it. But history has come into it, function has come into it, and hence it can be used in a comfortable way. Again, this is a house in London, in one of the big squares. The idea was, you know, it was one of those things that again had gone through a lot of developers' hands, and what you do with it to bring that sort of sense of the, you know, 19th century back into it. And here, by putting that chinoiserie wallpaper there, which you know, could have easily been there. It could have easily been that somebody who had a house, a grand house in the country in 18th century, that chinoiserie wallpaper, they could have brought it to London. All sorts of stories are attached to it. And I'd like that stories to be floating in the air. It's up to you to decide how that happened. It's just here. It works. It goes with the furniture. The room has got an element of the past, but for today, it's a 2014 or 13 room, but it takes you back, probably centuries. It functions, it is comfortable, and it works. Again, this is another one of those rooms, which was a very narrow room. Most people, I mean, at the beginning, I just didn't know what to do with it. It was a room that you went into the garden, and you couldn't, you know. So by giving it this sort of little, it became a little lady study, if you like. And by bringing the garden inside the house, which is, you know, by having that sort of Swedish look of, you know, the trees growing, somehow it became a room, and in fact it became a very favorite room of the lady of the house. And she was spending more time in this tiny little home than the rest of the house. But because it was comfortable, it had a function, and it served its function, it was pleasing to look at, it made sense because it's just outside, the garden is outside, but the garden is inside at the same time too. So that's how it worked, really.
Another sort of quality that I can see in your design is attention to details and quality.
You know, this is a sort of example of a concrete shell that one gets. In fact, this has gone a bit further than, you know, when we got it, there were no walls here, just the load-bearing bits. So we've actually put even those blocks in. Is to go from that to this. Detail is something that I just cannot let go. I mean, I'm a detail man. I'm an obsession with detail and how it is and how it works. And if the back of the sofa, I always say, that will never be seen. If the detail is wrong, you never deliver it. It's got to be put right. And I think in the long run, it pays off. You know, when you're a detail person. I mean, this is all about detail. This is a typical thing that I did not produce it. It's a timeless room because it's from the 18th century, the room. It's still there. But they bought these series of Burne-Joneses, which is, you know, I'm sure a lot of you know Burne-Jones is a very important painter in the latter part of the 19th century. The present owner's ancestor bought it in London. They brought it to this room. They just hung the paintings. Then Burne-Jones came himself and he was horrified at the way it was hung. And he actually designed all the paneling here himself and added some of the slips. But that's not the point. The point is that this is a room which was an 18th century room, but it's got this 19th century paneling in it, and how you go about doing anything to it. And we completely restored it the way it would have been. We scraped the paint, went back to the original paints. I had the fabric made specially. We had no time because the house was open to the public. There was a dye house. They were dyeing the yarn, weaving an inch or two, and I was saying, no, it's got to be more blue to it, because it had to be done. The house was open to the public. But it's sort of, this is an extreme case of detailing, which, you know, was such a constrained time limit on it that I don't want to do it.
Then you design rooms like this.
And then I go, yes, well, yes. Well, because you know, people want it, and I'm quite happy. I quite like to live there. I don't have to live in those very complicated rooms. But you know, the whole point of it is that if you've got a large enough house, if you've got a palace, if you've got a huge flat, you've got a huge house, you can afford to have some of those rooms. But if you don't have it, it's just a flat. I would go more towards this because you've got to be, you know, you've got to be reasonable and you've got to be practical. You're living in 2014.
I noticed that you've got a lot of maps in your design.
Yeah, I'm obsessed like this sort of maps and you know whatever. I mean, this is like a map of the UK in the 17th century. For some reason, it was always sideways, you know, sort of like that. Again, another. This is an early Georgian house in London that we inherited. The paneling, part of the paneling was original, part of it didn't exist. That bookcase at the back did not exist. We designed it from scratch. But if you're in the room, it doesn't look as if anything was added. It was just cleaned up. Again, the whole point of the bringing balance and harmony back and function and comfort and all that applies to all these rooms.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.